Airbnb. Come in. Morning, we're outside the Royal Shakespeare Theatre. There are quite a few people here waiting, like I am. We're just waiting for 10 o'clock and the theatre will open and we'll go in for the spring school. There are two shows that are on at the moment in RST/Swan Theatre. Hamlet by Shakespeare and Edward II by Christopher Marlowe. So those are the two plays we are going to look at. I don't think we're going to study them. It's probably too strong a word. We will be hearing from actors from these two shows and directors as well, I think, and then just generally thinking about the play. I think one session is talking about the ending of Edward II and one is a Q&A with the actor. I will report more as the day goes on. I will be going in now. I can see the theatre is open. The crowd has disappeared into it, so I will be joining them. So talk to you later. Morning is the second day of the spring school and the third day of our holiday. I want to share with you what I learned, what I heard from yesterday before I go to the second day of the spring school. So I got my notes. So the first session in the morning was an interview with two actors from this production of Hamlet. I'm going to watch the Hamlet this evening. I think I'll talk about the show later after I watched it, rather than telling you what I heard about it now. The two actors, one of them was the guy who plays Leontes and the other one is Claudius. So they were talking about the rehearsal process and the stage design. So they gave the audience a lot of time to ask questions. So there was a lot of questions about the stage design, which is a highlight or a talking point. The whole stage tilts from 0 degree all the way to 35 degrees, and everybody have to run around on that tilted stage. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to seeing that. They talked about how to prep for characters in Shakespeare and how to prep for characters from non-Shakespeare plays, and is there any difference? And they talked about sign language actor on stage, how do they interact with them. One fun fact was that the actor who plays Leontes, he is the understudy of Hamlet, and one show in this run he played Leontes in the first half of the show, and during the interval they had to announce that Hamlet couldn't carry on anymore and he had to step in to play Hamlet for the second half of the show. That sounded very impressive. How do you do that? They were talked a little bit about how, if that happened, how do you help the audience to switch from, oh, this actor is one character, now he's another actor. How do you help the audience to kind of make that switch smoothly? And then the second session was a lecture, a talk from a professor from the University of Birmingham. So she was talking about Marlowe, Christopher Marlowe, because the second show that's part of this program, this spring school, is Edward II, which we watched last night. I'll tell you about the show a bit later. So her talk is about Marlowe and Edward II. So she said a little bit about Marlowe as a person. Historically, he was controversial in every way. He himself got into troubles all the time, and his works were very controversial, confrontational at the time as well. And we talked a little bit about his impact on Shakespeare in terms of language, in terms of style and story. And then she moved on to talk about Edward II as a play, as well as a historical figure. So at Marlowe's time, Edward II was 250 years before Marlowe. Does that make sense? So I don't know how much you know about Edward II. So his father was Edward I and his son was Edward III. So there's Edward I, II, and III right next to each other. And after Edward III is Richard II, if that helps at all. Because we all know Richard II from Shakespeare's play. So on the way here in the car, we listened to a BBC radio production of Edward II, just to get familiar with the story. I was struck by how similar these two plays are, Richard II and Edward II. They are very, very similar in many, many ways. The storyline, the plot line, the characters, their personality, even their wives share the same name from the same country, and that's historically accurate. It's just, what's the coincidence? And the way, how Richard II kind of give up his crown, take it back, like reluctant, back and forth, that's even the same. So if you like Richard II, definitely give Edward II a go and compare and see which you prefer, because Edward II was written first and Shakespeare was inspired and wrote Richard II. It makes a difference in my head. I always thought Shakespeare is such a genius, kind of out of context-ly genius, but there was a context. Historically, literally, his works didn't come out of a vacuum. This is all quite eye-opening. And in terms of the drama, the show, the focus in this talk was on the ending, so the murder of Edward II. Sorry about the spoiler, he died. And he was murdered in quite a cruel, gruesome, graphic way. And the professor was talking about how those details, the action, how he was killed, was not written in Marlowe's play script, because the audience knew at the time, because it was written in history textbook, and the source of Marlowe's play, which is Holinshed's Chronicles, it's also the source of a lot of Shakespeare's history plays. And it's written in detail, in graphic detail, in this textbook, in Holinshed's Chronicles, how he was killed. And the professor was comparing two on the screen for us. And that's quite eye-opening as well. I don't want to tell you, because that's a main point. That's like a main thing for the show. I don't want to ruin that for you. So that's the second session, a talk from the professor. And the third session was called Interpreting Edward II with Daniel Evans, the co-artistic directors of RSC, who also plays Edward II in the show itself. So we are getting a perspective from the actor-manager point of view, which is very interesting, because if you think Shakespeare himself, he was an actor manager and he had a share in the company, so he wasn't just focusing on the art side of things, the story, the drama, he also had to think about money, actors, cast management, all that kind of thing, dealing with the authorities, dealing with the government. So that's quite interesting. He was very nice. He was a very nice kind of personality, listening to him. He talked a little bit about the difference between Marlowe and Shakespeare from an actor's point of view, like their lines, the meter. He was talking about Marlowe's stories were all quite brutal, violent, and his lines are quite rigid, carry on going like a march. Shakespeare is a lot more gentle, is that the right word? There's more of a balance. There's violent things happening, but also there are internal monologue. Like if you think about Richard III, there's awful things happening on the outside, but at the end you hear his monologue, a soliloquy about how he feels. That's one of the differences, and it shows in the meter as well. And then he shared a little bit about what is it like being an artistic director for the first time, not for the first time, for this first year for RSC, what he learned. And then we watched the show in the evening. It was he called it a political thriller. It was very fast. It was 1 hour and 40 minutes, so it's quite short. There was no interval. It was just carry on going, boom, boom, boom. And it was a thriller. We both liked it. Me and my husband, we both liked it. It was about politics, but I guess at the bottom of it, it's about how you think about the private life of a king and the public life of a king. So the conflict is basically Edward II, who in this play very explicitly portrayed as a gay king. He has a lover, and he would have his lover rather than his kingdom. So he has a wife as well and children, but he said, I will have my Gaveston with me, otherwise the life is not worth living, kind of thing. But obviously his lords don't like it, and they banished his lover and they brought him back. It was complicated. So this whole conflict carries on until he was disposed, he was imprisoned, and he was murdered. And who became the next king, who was trying to grab power? Yeah. And the death, the murder, it was very graphic. It was very, very well done, but I've never seen something like this on stage before. I just feel like plays are getting bolder and bolder. I need to get ready to go soon. There are more interviews and more talks from today. I will carry you, take you along with me and show you more. So talk to you later. Morning. It's the 4th day of our holiday, so it's the next morning since I chatted to you last time, and I had the second day of my spring school. So the first thing we had was an interview with an actor in Hamlet. He's called Anton Lesser. He's quite famous apparently. I think he's in Game of Thrones and Wolf Hall and various TV series and various shows, but I didn't know him. So he was talking about playing the ghost and the player king and some of the lines of the grave digger in Hamlet. And it was a special session within the spring school. I think that session was sold as a one-off event, so there were a lot more people. And then after that we had a interview in the other place. So RSC has RST, Royal Shakespeare Theatre, Swan Theatre, and another theatre space called the other place. And there's a history to that as well. It started as a theatre for experimental theatre, especially works directed by Buzz Goodbody. She was quite famous, a very young women director in the, I want to tell you the time, but I don't know. I'll try to put it on the screen. So we moved to that space for the second session, which was an interview with the director of Edward II, and he talked about the whole process. And then in the afternoon, the last session was with a professor from Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust, and he gave a rundown of all the productions since 1989 from RSC. So all the RSC productions of Hamlet since 1989. And yeah, it was interesting. I've only seen the David Tennant version. So after the run, they filmed it for TV, and I watched that TV version. And I also watched a little bit of the Benedict Cumberbatch edition production on screen as well. So that one was filmed by National Theatre Live. It was a long day yesterday, and the clock changed this morning, so I had one fewer hour of sleep. So sorry if I'm not very coherent, even less coherent than usual. I want to show you the program. I love collecting programs, and RSC's nice. Their programs are not expensive, and it's like decent size program as well with dedicated articles, because people love programs. People will buy them whatever the price to a certain extent. These programs are £6 each, which is acceptable. If they sell it for £10 or 12 or 15, I think people would still buy them. Will I still buy them? So I'm really glad RSC is quite fair with their program. I'll show you Edward II first, so you can see very explicitly it's about Edward II, the Gay King. So it's, I'll sit slightly on this side. I'm sitting on the floor, just in case you can't tell. So the foreword by two RSC co-artistic directors, and then there's their crown. The crown is actually the prop in the production, and then an article on Marlowe, on the life of Marlowe and why he wrote a play on Edward II. Past productions, some of them very famous productions. The professor on the first day talked about some of them. This is Simon Russell Beale, which was quite controversial. He was fully naked. It was quite like the murder was quite horrifying. He was fully naked on stage for a long time. This was this production we watched. The fight scene, there was a lot of violence. a lot of blood. I haven't read all of it yet. And then the cast, creative team, rehearsal, photos, and another cast with photos. Hope you can see. And the director, costume designer, lighting designer, composer, sound designer, movement director, all sorts. They have a big team. And then some artworks for upcoming shows. And then for Hamlet, so this is the publicity poster. Obviously, the skull and the water. Ooh. This little piece of paper is quite interesting. So on the night we bought it, it says, due to the indisposition of this person, the role of Cornelius and priest will be played by somebody else. And due to the indisposition of another person, the role of Bernardo will be played by another person. So they tell you who's the understudy. And this is Hamlet, the actor. They don't look quite the same, do they? But it's the same person, I think. Yeah. The interpretation, how they decide to cut certain sections. This is about the construction of that tilted stage. And this is like a top-down view. The hatches, and this is the deck of the ship. This is funny though. That bit says the set designer and the costume designer for Hamlet. So I think this was supposed to be a picture of those two people, those two designers, but this is Titanic. He says, Titanic. The show throughout the whole spring school was constantly referred to as Hamlet and Titanic because of the tilt. And it was quite easy. I'll tell you a bit more about the show later. So this Edwardian fashion and piece by Stanley Wells. And yeah, this is just a synopsis of the play. And then again, the cast, rehearsal photo. So this is Ophelia and Leontes. Which scene is this? Everybody's really wonky because the floor was never flat. So the cast, rehearsal photo, the designers and directors, and then more words. Yeah, so I'll put that little slip of paper back in the program so I don't lose them. So that's that. You see, I printed on nice thick matte paper as well. Important to me. So the show itself, the talking point is obviously that Titanic element, and they cut the show. Obviously, every Hamlet is cut. There's very few full-length 6-hour Hamlet in theatre. It happened, but the one we watched last night was about 3 hours with an interval. It was the last show of the run. By the end of the show, after their what's the word when they all line up and you applaud, they all turned around and took a selfie, the whole cast, the whole group with the musicians. It was really lovely. Yeah, the last scene was quite dramatic. The stage tilted to the full height and everybody was killed, right? And they were like fighting. The sword fight was very realistic and everybody was killed, and everyone just slid down the deck and then down into the sea, I guess. That was the idea. They just disappeared off the stage. I was like, ooh, this is new. Yeah, it was. Everybody's like, ooh, what's happening? I seen Gertrude just disappeared off the deck. It was great. It was a great production. But I have to say, I know this is controversial. At this stage of my life, I think Hamlet is just not my favorite play. Maybe partly because I'm not familiar with it, so I can't fully appreciate all the language, all the thought process, all the struggle inside him. The actor managed to make it funny, which I think didn't happen very often. Even with David Tennant, it wasn't funny. David Tennant didn't try to make it funny. And for this production specifically, I really felt the sorrow of Ophelia when she sang the song, when she went mad. it was really sad to watch. That really touched me. And to think that Hamlet, well, for this production, I felt like Hamlet genuinely loved her, but because of the revenge he had to carry on. He just couldn't love her anymore. And it's almost like he sacrificed his love and her for his father, for what's more important in these circumstances. And yeah, that all kind of come together for me for the first time. This is the end of the spring school. We'll be seeing family for the rest of the day, so I won't film any more after this, and it's almost 10 o'clock. We need to check out, so I need to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed coming along to Stratford, seeing various places, and enjoying hearing me talking about the program and the shows. I might do a video comparing and contrasting Edward II and Richard II, just because I find that quite fascinating. But as usual, just an idea, I don't promise anything. I'm sorry, I promised other things which I haven't done either. But let me know if you're interested. So that's all for today. Well, that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next one.